Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about National Signing Day in the world of college football recruiting, which was this past Wednesday. We know it's always the first Wednesday in February. If you have any thoughts on it, please feel free to let me know. I'm going to run down the top 25 real quick. The list I will be using is 24/7. You know by now I prefer 24/7 over any other sports website. I really like the work they do, and they don't show a lot of favoritism towards one team or one conference like a lot of other networks and magazines do. Again, if you have any thoughts on it, please feel free to let me know. The number one team in recruiting was Texas A&M. They had 29 total commitments, and they added one at the very last minute named Shamar Stewart that helped them get to the total of 29. Now, there's a big riff going on right now between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban. I hope everybody watched the press conference that Jimbo Fisher did. I'm guessing it was sometime Wednesday, but I watched it yesterday, and you can tell he's angry, and you can tell he's agitated. I don't think Jimbo Fisher is a very good coach, but he was honest and truthful in a lot of things he said. It doesn't make him a better coach, but he was honest and truthful in a lot of what he said, and I'm glad he said it. For whatever reason, Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban just do not get along. But I've said before here on the channel that Nick Saban is a whiny baby. But like anybody else, as long as you win, if you whine, nobody cares. He came out 10 years ago complaining about how college football needs to do away with the spread offenses and the hurry-up offenses because it's bad for the game and it's bad for the health of the players. And then when he realized that nobody was listening, he just decided to join in the fun and start running the same offense everybody else was doing. And then a few years back, when the playoffs started, Nick Saban said that he didn't think if you won your conference that you had any reason to go to the playoffs. You should at least win your conference to be a playoff team. Well, then when Alabama made the playoffs without winning their conference, he didn't come out and say, you know what, we didn't win our conference, we shouldn't go to the playoffs. He was fine with doing it. So when somebody else goes to the playoffs but don't win their conference, it's wrong. But when Alabama goes to the playoffs and don't win their conference, it's perfectly okay. And now he just continues to whine about the transfer portal and the name, image, and likeness. And Dabo Swinney said one time that he didn't like it and it was bad for the game, and everybody acted like Dabo was the worst thing ever for saying it one time. And now Nick Saban's complained about it for the past 6 months, and nobody's saying a word because it's Nick Saban. It just goes to show how you get by with stuff more as long as you're winning and as long as you're top of the game. But all of a sudden, when you're not winning, those things you said come back to haunt you. But for whatever reason, Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban just do not get along. Most of the assistants that coached under Nick Saban, once they become head coaches, they talk good about him. But with Jimbo Fisher, that's just not the case. I did think it was funny that Lane Kiffin made some kind of comment like Texas A&M should have to pay a luxury tax for all these commits they're getting. And I personally thought that was funny, and I just thought it was Lane Kiffin just being Lane Kiffin. But number two in recruiting was Alabama with 25 total commitments. They added a big-time star at the last minute named Jeremiah Alexander. And then we had Georgia finishing with 29. They had a commitment from Kristen Miller. I'm not going to sit here and name off every single commitment that every single team had. It would just take all day long. I'm just trying to name one or two of the biggest commitments that these teams had. Ohio State had 21 total, which included C.J. Hicks and Sonny Styles on the defense, which we know, as bad as the Buckeyes were on defense this past year, they need all the help they can get. They should have signed 21 commitments just on the defense alone. Number 6 was Texas, who had 28 commitments, including Kelvin Banks and Brennan Thompson. And then we had Penn State with 25, which included Nicholas Singleton and quarterback Drew Aller. And I just hope that he ends up, for Penn State's sake, he ends up progressing better than their last quarterback did, because Sean Clifford was there for 75 years, and his freshman year was the best he ever was. Number 7 was Notre Dame. Number 8 was Oklahoma. Both of those teams had 21 total commitments. Number 9 was Michigan. They had 22, including Will Johnson and Derek Moore. And Jim Harbaugh decided he was not going to the NFL. He was going to stick around with the Wolverines. And rounding out the top 10 was North Carolina. They had 17 total commitments. And for them to only have 17 and finish top 10, that tells you that everybody they signed had to pretty much be a 4 or 5 star player. That included Travis Shaw, a phenomenal pass rusher, which, just like Ohio State, they need all the help they can get on defense. Here locally where I am, there was a high school player from the 2021 class that actually went to North Carolina, and he plays defense. And a couple of folks I know before this past season started asked me about North Carolina, and I said, they'll be decent. Their defense is going to suck. And they pretended like just because they signed those local players, they were going to be so much better. And I said, their defense is going to suck. I don't think Mac Brown even cares anymore. I think he's just there because he used to coach there, and he wants to finish out his coaching days at UNC. If they win, fine. If they lose, fine. Because these past 2 years, they haven't even attempted to play any kind of defense whatsoever. They could play a peewee team and give up 40. They just don't care. Number 11 was Clemson. They had 20 total commitments, including Jaden Lucas. And Clemson's recruiting class actually finished a lot better than a lot of people thought it was going to. But a lot of people look at all these other programs and think if they get all these players, Clemson can too, and they probably could. But Dabo Swinney's always said, I don't care about quantity, I care about quality. I would rather sign 20 kids that want to be here who are, 3, 4 stars, a couple of 5 stars, than sign 30 kids when half don't want to be here just because they're 5-star players. Like Texas A&M right now has 8 quarterbacks on their roster. Why do you need 8 quarterbacks on your roster? There's no reason to have 8 quarterbacks on your roster. 2 of them probably ain't never going to see the field, and 3 of them probably going to transfer. So what's the reason? There's not one. It's just to boost up your recruiting. So that's why Dabo Swinney says I'm looking at quality and not quantity. So according to most people, they were going to finish around 20th. So to finish 11th was actually a lot better than a lot of people were expecting. 12th was another Tiger team. That was LSU. They had 15 total, including Will Campbell. And 13th was Kentucky. And that's a phenomenal recruiting class for the Wildcats of Kentucky. They had 20 total commitments, including Keonta Goodwin, who has enrolled early to go ahead and try to be ready by the start of the 2022 season. And 14th was Missouri. And I couldn't tell you the last time Missouri finished that high in recruiting. They had 17 total, which includes Luther Burden, who was originally committed to Oklahoma, and he changed his commitment to Missouri. And number 15 was Miami. They only had 14 commitments, which includes Trevante Citizen, who is a running back. So just like North Carolina, for them to only have 14, that tells you everybody they signed, they are expecting a lot out of. But of course, I'm not a big fan of Cristobal. He'll bring in all this talent, and then he'll go probably 8-4. I think Mario Cristobal, until he proves me wrong, I think he's going to be another Jimbo Fisher that's going to have all this phenomenal recruiting every single year and then do nothing but 8-4, 9-3. But now for Jimbo Fisher to have the number one recruiting class in America, I know he makes a lot of money. I understand that. And they say, they look at these big contracts and say, man, he makes too much to be fired. He can be fired. When you finish this high in recruiting and you have 29 commitments and you have 5 stars at almost every single position on the field, if he doesn't at least win the SEC West in the next 3 years, I think he'll be gone. And then we'll just run through the rest of the top 25. 16th was Tennessee, 17th, Stanford, 18th, Auburn, 19th, Florida, and 20th, Florida State. And then 21st, Indiana, 22nd, Michigan State, 23rd, Ole Miss, 24th, Arizona, and 25th was Oregon. Now, it's hard to believe that Arizona could be as bad as they were this past year, and they were absolutely atrocious. And they somehow finished 24th in recruiting, so that's a great job by the Arizona coaching staff. And as far as Auburn is concerned, I'm reading an article that says Brian Harsin may be fired sometime before the weekend is over. Now, it doesn't make much sense to do it now because you just had National Signing Day. And if a lot of these kids came to Auburn to play for Brian Harsin and then you fire him as soon as recruiting is over with, then all those commitments you got that helped you finish 18th in recruiting are going to turn around and leave because you're changing head coaches. So if you were going to do it, I don't know why you wouldn't have done it after the season or after the bowl games instead of doing it now. But I think they're panicking, which the Brian Harsin hire never made sense. You know, I've mentioned it before here on the channel that I think they only ran off Gus Malzahn because the fans, wanted it. I don't think the Auburn higher-ups wanted to do it. I just think the fans wanted him gone. So Auburn didn't have anybody in mind because they weren't talking to anybody because they weren't planning on firing Gus Malzahn. But then when they had to do it because the fans pretty much demanded it, they just had to go get the first person that would take the job, which was Brian Harsin. The hire never made sense. The hire still doesn't make sense. I heard an interview earlier this week with a Auburn writer, and he was talking about how he felt sorry for Mike Bobo because, yes, the offense sucked this past year, but they just didn't have the personnel, and they could have had anybody in the world coaching their offense, and their offense still would have sucked because they just didn't have the personnel. So basically he was saying that Mike Bobo just, had to be fired because a change had to be made even though it wasn't his fault. And then the offensive guy you brought in hasn't even been there 2 months, and he's already stepped down. So now they're back to having no coordinator. So it looks like the program is just in complete shambles, which would be the reason why you would fire Brian Harsin. But to me, the program was in complete shambles when you fired Gus Malzahn. So nothing has changed in the past 1 year plus. But supposedly Brian Harsin is going to be fired before the weekend is over with. So we'll have to sit back and wait and see where that goes. Again, any thoughts on recruiting, please feel free to let me know. This is the list from 24/7. I trust it more than I do trust any other news source or sports source, only because most of them, a lot of them, show favoritism towards certain conferences or towards certain players. And you can have a player that's going to go to a certain school and he's a 3-star. Well, he'll change his mind and go to a big-time school, and all of a sudden he's a 5-star. Well, I don't like that. If you're a 3-star at one place, you're a 3-star every place. If you're a 5-star at one place, you're a 5-star every place. So that's why I go by 24/7. To me, they're more honest and truthful and right down the middle, which is how it should be. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. Did you hear the one about the roof? Never mind. It's over your head. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.